Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very, very special guest. Of course, we have our co-host, Corinne French. Hello, Corinne.
Hey, nice to be here.
Thanks for being here, Corinne. And our guest today from Hayes Consolidated Independent School District Board President, Vanessa Petrea. Vanessa, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Shout out to the women board presidents. Woohoo, Gary.
Nice.
We got two female presidents on the podcast today. What a joy. I can't wait to get to know you, Vanessa.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. It's exciting, right? It's an exciting time that we're in. And Vanessa, if you can, just tell us a little bit about your background so those listening in get to know you a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. In my day job, I'm a legal marketer. So I work for law firms doing marketing. I actually just made a switch to another firm. And I am also very involved in that space. I'm the president of the Legal Marketing Association Southwest region, if anybody cares about that. And so I'm plugged in professionally. And then personally, I am very, very passionate about education. So I've been on the board since 2017. I took the reins of the presidency in May of last year, 2021, thinking that we had gone through the hard stuff of COVID, not realizing that this year would actually be harder than last year. I have two kids. I have one at the University of Texas, San Antonio, studying chemistry. And then I have a freshman in high school here in Hayes, CISD, in band and debate and all the things. I'm married to an awesome husband, Micah, who is currently the president of the Hayes Education Foundation and has served on the foundation for many, many years. And so, a lot of education stuff going on around here. And we're a busy family, as you might imagine.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, you have a lot going on between, on the legal field. I have a couple family members that are in that field, and I know how many hours that can take up. Plus, as a board member, board president, that's a volunteer position. That's a
Correct.
Position you're serving the community, and you've probably seen a lot in your school district. I'm kind of curious, what's a topic that you're really passionate about related to public education?
So I'm glad you asked that. I have been very passionate about and continue to beat the drum of the social and emotional learning, SEL for short. Some districts have full-on departments that really do a good job of helping children in this area. Obviously, larger districts have the funds to be able to do that. We have about 21,000 students in our district, so we're not small by any stretch, but we don't have a full-on infrastructure staff for SEL to support all the campuses. We do, with our ESSER funds, plan to put an SEL person at all of our campuses. We do this in kind of fits and starts. I feel like some campuses, especially at the elementary level, do a great job of having some kind of program. Maybe it's 7 Mindsets or something like that, or Leader in Me. And then at the secondary level, it gets really, really tricky. Kids you need something different to reach them. And I'm a big fan of Because I Said I Would. I don't know if you've familiar with that program, but I love it. I've seen what they've done in Comal ISD with it. And right before the pandemic, we were actually making some headway there with maybe getting that program into our secondary schools. And then everything, as you know, is just kind of stopped. Then we went virtual, and then we were hybrid, and now we're back in person. But we are just so focused on learning loss right now that SEL feels like a luxury of something to focus on. But mental health is at the forefront, thankfully, again, with kids hiding behind the masks or having been virtual for so long. And I hear teachers talk about the Zoom face, and I'm just going to wait them out because they just don't want to engage. And so teaching to the whole child, making those relationships, education, a lot of things you can just Google around and find out and learn, and YouTube. And so we want kids to want to be at school. And we know that if you don't connect with the kid's heart, you're not going to get into their head. They're not going to care about what you're teaching if you can't build those relationships. So that's probably a long-winded answer as to what I'm passionate about.
No, that's perfect. I think this is the first time we've had a guest talk about SEL. And I want to make sure our listeners know there are all kinds of terms we throw around in education, and sometimes they get lost in the shuffle of importance. Can you just and you did a great job already, but can you go back just a minute and like, what is SEL? And maybe even say what it looks like in a district my size. So we have under 1,000 students in a very rural school north of the Metroplex. And then in a school like yours, and then in a school system like Dallas CISD. I mean, what does it look like? What are specific examples? And you mentioned, because I said I would, and oh my gosh, I fell in love with that program too, right before COVID, thinking, oh, maybe we can start something like this in our district. But can you just kind of go back and like get us all on the same page what this means?
You bet. So it's the definition, if you will, is just sort of the process for helping children and adults kind of with those fundamental skills for being in society, right? Just character building, but more than that. And I kind of want to get a better definition because I know there's some really good resources online, but I'll keep it short. Just in all the things that we as adults know are important in the soft skills, if you will, compassion, empathy for others, telling the truth. The whole "because I said I would" is just what it is. Like I said, I was going to show up to this job interview, and I got to show up to the job interview, or whatever that is. And it's some of that's kind of been lost in our district. We, obviously we are focused on educating children, and that is the most important thing. But like I said before, that it's kids have figured out that they can learn on their own. They don't need us all the time. Obviously I'm sort of painting a broad brush. You're not going to learn physics 2 really that well on the YouTube. But we need to engage each other and build those relationships. So it looks different, like you said, at different districts. So for example, AISD, I've actually talked to their head of SEL, and they have this huge infrastructure, and they have programs that are done with fidelity in all their campuses, and lots of money in the budget for their SEL program. In a district our size, we have something called 100% Hays, which one thing we have figured out is if kids are involved in something, fine arts, athletics, whatever that is, that there's another adult that can be a sponsor for them outside of their teachers. What is the adult that a student can go to in a crisis or can celebrate with them, and just have a different person outside of those teachers they interface with all day? And so for my daughter, that's her band director. She talks to her band directors all the time. And so we get statistics, and we just had this at our last board meeting, how many of our students are involved in something, because we know, and just to back up on SEL and why it's important, lower discipline referrals. We know attendance is better. We know that tests are higher in these districts that do this well. And not that we care always about tests, but just that learning engagement we know is higher. So all the statistics and data are there to support SEL. Why we can't get funding from the state for this, I don't know. It comes up every legislative session. You'll see different character or SEL, but a lot of times there's not any money associated with those bills.
Is that money to hire like educators? Is that kind of what, or is it more for tools and resources in the classroom?
Either one would be great.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
Or, like you might have, like, I could see the legislature doing something like requiring you to have some kind of SEL something, and then not giving you any money for that. Right. Because, there can be some homegrown resources, Corinne, to your point, at your size, you very well could maybe put some things together, yourselves, or have the counselor help with that. And I know at the elementary school level, we certainly do that. Our counselors help do those SEL lessons. Now, lately they've been really busy with other things, so that's hard to do. But you may even have to kind of come up with your own initiative around this, but I it's sad to me that the state isn't focused more on this.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny you mentioned that. So yeah, I recently did a poll on, I think it was on LinkedIn, just asking about what parents see the value of public education, just trying to get some feedback, unbiased feedback, if you will. And you mentioned fidelity. So obviously there's a financial side there. And that was one thing that came up. It was actually a big thing that came up, was the financial side of things, just dealing with finances, no matter what it may be when you get out of school one day. Now you mentioned empathy, you mentioned doing what you say you were going to do, that sort of stuff. Is there like a character building element to it as well? Because some of that seems like it's, just being a good person a little bit,
Absolutely. Good citizenship, that's obviously would be part of that. I think, digital citizenship should be part of that, if I'm being honest.
Right. And maybe we have a parent class for that too.
That could be a whole other podcast episode, but yes, the digital citizen, yes. And parents need to take that class right alongside their teenagers, but, that will continue to be a problem. There's a big, do I let my kids ever have Snapchat, or do I let them have it and put some guardrails around it? I mean, you can learn lots of things, I feel like, from SEL, just how to be a good human being at the end of the day, and how to, read cues of other people. If they need somebody to just say, hey, how are you doing today? What's going on? How can I help you?
I know we are short of time, and I want to ask this question because I think this is so important. We kind of mentioned the parent piece, and you and I are both doing this as an elected official on our own time. And you mentioned your spouse being also very involved. What are some encouraging tips that you have for those of us that are running for re-election? I just filed Friday, and for the community too. Like, what kinds of things do you wish and hope for, your big dreams for those of us who are serving and continue to serve?
Well, that's a great question. Congratulations. I wish you the best of luck. I know election season is hard. I am not up for another year. This is a really hard time to be a school board member. And so I would say, to continue staying positive and looking for those wins that that you have. A lot of people have just recently come into the fold and think that they know a lot about what we do as board members. And so, stay focused on those goals that you have and those wins that you've accomplished. I'm a big advocate of knocking on doors. If you live in a community that size, you probably know a lot of people already. And so just focusing on those relationships is important. And, social media is a big part of it where we live. I don't know if that's something you feel strongly about, but we're certainly a social media driven community, good or bad. And I engage. And I just let the chips fall where they may. I try to engage. If it gets ugly, I bow out, and I just let people figure out why I'm not responding as things escalate. But I try very hard to be kind in all of my responses, regardless of what people are saying to me and how they are coming at me and the negativity and the ugliness. I always try to respond with respectfulness, just being very respectful and kind. I'm sure we've had lots of public speakers at our meetings, and I am always very deferential to our speakers. I make sure they feel heard and never want to have any kind of body language that makes them feel unheard, which is hard because they say some really, really strange things sometimes about what they perceive as going on.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. And I hope our listeners can take that advice too from you, that just honoring people, even in wherever they're coming at it. Because I think most people want what's best for students. And we could be approaching that and walking that out in different ways. So I love that. This has been so lovely to get to meet you on this virtual platform. I really hope we can meet in person someday soon.
I would love that.
Yes. And obviously there's some topics here in a future episode. We could go even more detailed in some of those topics. And SEL, it is a hot topic. I mean, I've seen it on social media myself. I'm a huge advocate of social media. It's a great way to connect with people. Obviously, our podcast is on most major platforms, podcast platforms, and social media channels. So thank you, Vanessa, for being on the podcast today and sharing your thoughts on SEL, and for those that are looking to run for school board or get reelected in the school board, some great advice there as well. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact provides funding for school districts. So far, $1.5 billion. Everything is in the form of a free gift. They've worked with over 160 districts. And it's not just a grant. They generate a source of revenue, yearly revenue for school districts that can be used for anything, maybe an SEL program. And for those that have been tuning in, thank you for tuning in to the Educational Leadership Podcast.